Honoring our elder, Tay 3.
Okay.
This is interview 3. Is this number 3 or 4?
It's like 4.
Oh, interview 4. My name is Mike Shriver, and I just turned 61 in May. So I'm the youngest queer elder that I know. And I am a gay, HIV positive, Jewish, openly in recovery man. I live in San Francisco. I've been here since 1987. I think when you make a commitment to be an activist, you make a commitment to a life of activism. And the statement from the Jewish scholars, the Jewish wisdom, the sages, the Pirkei Avot is, you may not complete the task, but that doesn't relieve you of the obligation of continuing to work on it. And what underscored my entire life professionally and as an activist was it's what you did. Like it was all action oriented. It was all orthopractic. Like everything was about, it didn't matter if you wanted to end the AIDS epidemic, you needed to do something about it, whether that's shutting down a bridge or protesting or doing it in your work life. So the idea that here was this religious tradition that just absolutely ran parallel to the way I saw the world and the way I saw how I was supposed to be in the world. Like it's like what you do. Like this is who we are. And at my core, at my deepest level, I completely believe that we are meant to be in community. That we are only as strong as the community within which we belong. And I believe that belonging to a community is work. It's not a passive sort of, I'm here. No, I mean, it takes work. It takes work to be in a relationship. It takes work to be in a community because there's value in the work. 1989 is one of the most amazing, is probably one of the most pivotal years for my life. That's the year that we shut down the Golden Gate Bridge in January, that we occupied the INS office, which is now ICE. We occupied the INS office here for a couple of hours. We disrupted the opening of the opera. Some folks I know actually disrupted the opening of the Rose Bowl parade. And that was also the year that I tested positive. And my partner and I, my first boyfriend, the one who I left everything for and moved out here to, broke up. It was quite a year, huge year. Yeah. Oh, and we disrupted the opening of the 5th International Conference on AIDS in Montreal. Yeah. Lo and behold, I eventually go on the board of the National AIDS Memorial, and then eventually become the chair of the board of the National AIDS Memorial, and spent a lot of my time doing work for the AIDS Grove, for the memorial, which now, of course, it's not just the National AIDS Memorial in Golden Gate Park, but also the AIDS Quilt. They're all part of the National Memorial. So when you ask me what I do now, what I've done and what I do now is the Grove. That's what I do to honor Patrick. I don't know if I get on the list, but Jimmy and Kitty, and it's what I do to honor Frank, my mentor, my boss, and Glenn, my partner, and Pedro Zamora, and all those people. That's what I do. I support this place that I thought in the late 80s, early 90s was just a crock of crap, but turned out for me, being on the board became like this incredibly important part of my recovery. Not just my physical recovery, but my sort of my emotional and spiritual recovery. The Grove is predicated on 3 words: hope, healing, and remembrance. And the idea is that as a community, we need to find a way to come together to begin to heal, to always remember, and to possibly find hope. So they created this space, and in 1991, they began creating the Grove, and it was all landscaped, architecturally landscaped. So there are features throughout this entire footprint that are about broken circles because of the break in the circle of all of our lives and relationships. And it's all about light and dark, that we move in moments of every day and through our lives, from like moments of light to moment of darkness. And that's just natural. So as you move through the Grove, spots that are light, and then you go through the forest where it's dark, and then you come out in the meadow where it's light. And they worked with the city and found this piece of property, which is 10 plus acres in Golden Gate Park, of completely derelict land. It was a garbage dump in 1991. It was just big ridges and then a basin that was filled with trash. And in 1991, they created the first community volunteer workday, and a group of volunteers came out here and, with the help of 61 dump trucks, excavated this garbage dump, this piece of derelict, abandoned land, and began the process of creating the AIDS Memorial. The idea was that if we could collectively create a space in nature, which sort of mirrors the cycle of life every year, if you could create a space in nature that people were invested physically, manually invested in, it would give us all a chance to begin to deal with grief. So, but all of my friends who had AIDS or HIV when I was, of my closest circle, there were 10 of us, my ex-boyfriend, and me and 8 other guys, they're all dead. And then my next circle of friends, I'm the only one standing out of both of those circles. And I don't know why. I don't know why.
This reminded me of the idea of unclosed or interrupted circles, which is the idea that when someone loses someone to AIDS, it creates an interruption in their life. And this idea is used a lot within the AIDS Memorial Grove, which we visited with Mike, and all of the circles of names and different things that exist within the grove are intentionally left unclosed or interrupted. And it made me think that Mike himself stands as a physical representation of this idea within these friend groups that he mentioned. He stands as a physical interruption to the circle of loss that exists for those friend groups.
The idea of using streets and access to bridges as a locus for activism has a storied tradition to that, because they use transportation to create zones, and it's how they would wall off the wrong side of the tracks, where they would start redlining and red zoning district. So if you experiencing inconvenience for a half an hour or an hour on the bridge is what turns you off of having a compassionate response to a fellow human being, you are the problem. The opera went off. The opera happened. We did not take people away from the reason that they were there. We just merely wanted to say, before you start watching your opera, whatever it is, we want you to understand that there's a crisis going on, and that we need you to think about how you invest your discretionary dollars. I started writing this poem in 1993, I think. Mm-hmm. So this poem took a long time to write. And it just struck me that the thing that people always say to you when you're dealing with grief is like, time heals, the wound, give it time. I've never found that to be true. It doesn't heal, it doesn't make things better, but that became the way that I could start thinking about Frankie and Glenn and my mom and Chuck. And, I could take it down the list of 100 names of people, but so if time isn't what I could finally say, because this is what I missed the most. That was the one way that I felt like I could finally put on paper what I felt about my friends. And so it just starts out, time is just the passing of time. And living sometimes means missing things, sometimes, often at times deeply. And often what I miss is the space in between, down to the core of my being. And as with meaning, memory is after the fact. The memory of those and those things which are and now are no more. So either we buckle under the pressure and just sort of succumb and give in to despair or defeat, or you don't. And if you move into that section of I'm not going to give up, I think you just take a big deep breath and just figure out where you're going to start. Just figure out where that first place is that you're going to start, whether that's clinic defense, whether that's women's access to healthcare that is women driven, where women have agency, or whether that's protecting our trans community, or whether that means climate change, or whether that means, equity in terms of income, inequality. My counsel would be figure out which door you're going to open, walk through that door, and just go. And just go.